John Farrell with the Farrell Law Firm. Today we're going to talk about living trusts and the benefits of living trusts. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We put out new videos almost every day. And make sure you hit the like button because, hey, every like helps. All right, in today's video, you're going to know everything that you need to know about trusts and the benefits of living trusts by the end of this video. All right, so let's talk about estate planning first and just what is estate planning? Well, estate planning is very important. I think there have been surveys that have said that less than half the people in America have even a basic estate plan. Basic estate plan would include something like a last will and testament, a power of attorney, and an advance directive for health care. Those are what we would call an essential estate plan. So why is that important? Well, if you pass away with a will or without a will, the state's going to determine where all of your assets go. It's called intestacy. So you passed away, what's called intestate, meaning you passed away without a will. Well, when that happens, the state decides where all of your things go. And it might not necessarily be where you want it to go. Look, I know it's an easy thing not to talk about. No one wants to think about their own demise, but let's face it, that day is coming for all of us. And so wouldn't it be better if you just went ahead and planned for that day so that it'd make things easier on your family? Well, what's so bad about probate? Well, mainly it's time and costs. And so the probate process is the court-supervised distribution of your assets. And so if you were to pass away with things in your name, whether you had a will or not, those assets would need to go through that probate process. That's what the probate process is there for, is to determine what assets you have and where it goes, depending on whether you had a will or not. So probate in general can take anywhere from months to years to complete. And I say it months or years because oftentimes you never really know how long it's going to take. That's why we do our probate work by the hour. Because once you file the will down at the courthouse, it has to go through the processing department. It'll eventually make its way to a law clerk. The law clerk will look it over, give it to the judge. The judge will review it, make a decision, give it back to the law clerk, who will give it to the processing department, who will pass it on to the family. And those things just take time. Now, when it comes to costs, costs can be somewhat manageable as long as you don't have to hire an attorney, but going through the probate process yourself is kind of like pulling your own tooth. Yeah, you might be able to do it, but you'd be much happier if you let a professional do it. And the probate process is a lot like that. Even if you were able to do it yourself, ultimately you may just be unhappy and wish you had hired a lawyer to begin with once you get to the end. And so probate is often lengthy because it takes months and years to complete, and sometimes it's costly because you've got court fees, attorney fees, maybe real estate closing fees, miscellaneous court-related fees. So just lots of fees can add up. So probate can be costly. It can be take a lot of time to go through. So that's why a lot of people consider, well, maybe we need to do something besides have our family go through the probate process when we pass away. Well, people will often come to the office and they'll say, well, thank goodness my family's not going to have to go through probate because I've got a will. Well, I hate to explain it to them, but if you have a will, your family's going to have to go through probate. Wills aren't designed to avoid your family going through probate. Instead, they're designed to guide your family through that probate process. So, one of the benefits to having a trust is the trust is mainly designed to avoid that process to begin with, because in your will, you'll say something like, I name an executor and this is where I want all of my assets to go. Those are the big two items when it comes to, having a will. But that will be filed down at the courthouse and it'll start this long process of probating your assets. Well, living trusts come in and they help avoid the probate process because they take the things out of your name and they put them into your trust name. And because your trust doesn't die, your assets don't get frozen by the probate process. So you've got an executor on the will side. Well, on the trust side, you've got a successor trustee. And that successor trustee, they sort of serve the same roles, but they don't have to get their authority from the probate judge like they normally would if you went through the probate process. They get their authority from the fact that you've passed away. When you pass away, they immediately step into your shoes, and they can do all the things that your trust says needs to be done with your assets. So benefits to the trust is that helps you avoid probate. That's a huge benefit over a will. Another benefit is that it's private. So wills get filed down to the courthouse and become part of the public record. That used to not be too much of a big deal until the internet came along. But when the internet came along, you can actually look up most of this stuff online. I do it every day. So you can see what people had, who's getting it, where it's going, how much they owed, really almost everything about their financial life. And so the benefit to the trust is that it doesn't get filed down at the courthouse and doesn't become part of the public record, so people can't look it up online. So, well, one of the great benefits also to trusts are that they're very flexible. So you can amend them as your life changes, and you should amend them as your life changes. I'll tell you, the biggest mistake I see many people make is that they'll take the plan, they'll put it into a drawer, and then they'll let 5, 10, 15, 20 years go by without really updating that document. And the document doesn't do what they originally wanted it to do because maybe the laws have changed and maybe their family circumstances have changed. So don't be one of those people. Well, when it comes to the trust, it's very flexible. You can prepare an amendment like you could with a will, but with a trust, you typically don't need witnesses. So the trust is a little bit easier to amend. So you can amend it the way that you need to, so that you can make sure it does exactly what it is that you need it to do. So one of the great things also about a trust is that you can really manage the distribution of your assets after you've passed away. So for example, you can have that trust, it's already in place when you sign it. So when you pass away, nobody has to create a trust like you would with a will, but the trust is already created when you sign it. When you pass away, it's still there. So it can manage the distribution of your assets. So let's say, for example, you have a child that has special needs and they receive government benefits. Well, their share can be managed through a supplemental needs trust. Essentially what it does, that trust that you created moves their funds over into a supplemental needs trust. They don't have to go through the 6-month to year-long process to create that supplemental needs trust like they would had they needed to go through the probate process. So having that trust already in place is a huge benefit to creating that supplemental needs trust. And let's say that your kids are minors and you just don't want them to get everything at 18. Well, you could set up a testamentary trust with a will, but it'd take months to create. And if you were to create your trust today, then the trust is already in place. So when you pass away, nothing really changes. So that money is there for the benefit of the child, and you can dole out how you want them to receive it instead of maybe receiving everything at 18. Over the course of my career, I've seen people do various things. Maybe they say 100% at 25, but people are more likely to do something like, 25% at 21, 25% at 25, and then, hey, let's do the rest at 30. So they do some variation of that. So managing a trust is very flexible. You have complete control over it while you're alive. You can buy things and put it into the trust. You can sell what's inside the trust. You can donate what's inside the trust. You can manage what's inside that trust while you're alive. So it's, very flexible in that way. So now, again, the big benefit to the trust is that it avoids probate. The way it avoids probate is that you take the things out of your name and you put them into the trust name. So the types of things that you're going to put into a trust like this include things like your real estate, typically checking and savings accounts, certificates of deposit. I practice in Texas, and so a lot of people have oil rights there. So you'll put oil rights into a trust. And so you take a lot of the things that you have, typically the things that are in your name, and you change them from your name into yourself as trustee of your trust name. So you are the trustee of that trust while you're alive. So you take your assets and you put them in there. Now, there are certain things that you won't put into the trust. So, for example, there's a big four. There are the IRAs, 401ks, life insurance policies, and annuities. For the most part, your IRAs and 401ks, you really won't do a whole lot with. But your life insurance policies and your annuities, you may go through the process of making the trust the primary beneficiary of those policies. So when you pass away, all of those proceeds gets filtered through the trust. So for example, if you're leaving some to a minor child, life insurance company isn't going to cut a check to that minor child, but they would cut it to the trust, and so that trust can then manage it for that minor child. So it's very flexible in that way. So again, there are a lot of benefits to trust. Some of them are things like privacy. Everybody gets their inheritances quicker. The assets don't get frozen in probate court. It is private, so nobody has to know what you have and who's getting it. A lot of benefits to trusts over wills. One of the great things about having a trust as well is that it's part of a picture of legacy planning. This is what I mean by this. So with legacy planning, you'll often have several documents associated with that living trust. You'll have a document called the certification of trust, for example. The great thing about the certification of trust is that it helps keep the trust private. Well, the way you keep it private is that you use the certification of trust. Typically about a one-page document that has some basic things about the trust, like when it was created, who the trustees are, what title things need to be put into when they go inside the trust, and who's going to be taking over when that day comes for you. So that certification of trust is often about a page long, just has some basic things about the trust, whereas the trust itself has many more details of what you have and who's getting it and how they're getting it and things like that. Well, that certification of trust doesn't have those things, so it helps keep a lot of your financial affairs private. Well, another document you'd have along with it is actually a will. You often will have a will with a living trust. I describe it to my clients like a safety net. You'll probably never need it, but it's there just in case your family needs it. Well, why would they need a will with a living trust? Well, from time to time, maybe you want to go buy a cabin up in your state and you just forget to put that cabin into your trust. Well, the great thing about the will is that it will catch that cabin and then push it into your trust for you. It will have to go through probate, but at least it will catch it and then push it into the trust for you. So that's the benefit of that will. So another part of your legacy is, well, what happens if you don't pass away? Let's say you get into an accident and you're just unable to take care of yourself because you've become incapacitated in some way. Well, there's two disability documents that we do with every living trust we've ever done. Those are a power of attorney and an advance directive. They allow a trusted family member, like a spouse or maybe an adult child, to do things for you. These are things like pay your bills, file your taxes, access your medical records, talk to your doctors on your behalf. All those simple things that you normally do, you just can't do because now you've become incapacitated in some way. Well, all of this, it creates a legacy for your family so that, when that day comes, I've heard families say, I'm so glad that Dad got everything together because everything was just super easy when he passed away. What an amazing legacy that is. And so they've made it easy because they've had all these documents in place, and whether they became disabled or perhaps they passed away, all of those things have made it easier on their family. And so that's just a great legacy to leave, for those that are left behind. They're already having to deal with your death. Well, make it easy on them and get an estate plan in place, especially one with a living trust as the center of that estate plan. So, addressing some of the myths that come along with having a trust. One of the myths that I often hear is that you lose control over your assets. Well, not with your typical revocable living trust. Again, you are in complete control of that trust. You can buy, sell, manage, donate, whatever's inside that trust. So it's a myth that you lose control over your assets with a revocable living trust. Now, mind you, there are trusts out there where you do lose control over your assets, but they are there for a specific purpose. We won't get into those in this video, but you can check out some of my other videos and you'll see maybe some of the other types of videos where you do lose control over your assets. Well, not with this. So it's a myth that with a revocable living trust, you lose control over your assets. Another myth that may come along with revocable living trust is that it protects you from creditors. Well, they won't really protect you from creditors. They do to some degree, but not much. Not for that enterprising attorney that wants to jump over all the hurdles to get to your assets. And that really comes down to control. Because you control all of the assets that are inside your revocable living trust, you're really not able to protect a lot of those things from creditors, because the more control you have over an asset, the more likely you'll have to access that asset to pay off creditors. So again, there are trusts out there that will allow you to protect your assets, but it really comes down to control. The revocable living trust, you've got control of your assets, so it really doesn't provide you that asset protection. So that's a myth when it comes to revocable living trust. So just summarizing some of the key points of what we've gone over today. Wills take you through the probate process. Trusts are designed to avoid it. So benefits to trusts are they're private. Nobody has to know what you have, who's getting it. Speaking of getting it, one benefit to the trust over the will is that wills go through the probate process, and that can be costly and lengthy. Trusts are designed to avoid that, so your family gets their inheritances quicker. If you become disabled, trusts are there to help you. Wills don't go into effect until after you've already passed away, so there's no help there. But living trusts have provisions in them so that your successor trustee can step in your shoes and take over your finances if you become disabled in some way. And if not, then you've got a legacy there because you've already put that power of attorney and advance directive in place. Because you're still alive, you're just not able to take care of your affairs, and your living trust, along with those disability documents, is a great resource for the people that will be taking care of you. So, all right, so that's really what living trusts are all about, and some of the benefits behind them. That's all we have for today. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we put out new videos every day. And hey, make sure you hit the like button, because hey, every like helps.